All right, we're recording. 2 secs. Oh, my screen is big. Anyway. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the next episode of the Quintessential Performance Insights. And today I've got a very close friend of mine, and he's taken time out of his busy schedule from way across the pond over in the United States of America to join us today. Ian, thanks very much, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, absolutely. It's my pleasure being here. Thanks for asking me to jump online and have a conversation about what we do and how we do it.
Absolutely, mate. And so before we sort of begin to sort of the meat of it, I always like to get my guests to sort of tell us a bit of a backstory of who they are, what they do, and sort of how they got to where they are now. So go for it, please.
Yeah, my name's Ian O'Brien. I'm obviously English. I live in the United States. I'm an Olympic coach for an international group of athletes. My story is kind of long and winding, so I'll be pretty quick about that one. But I think it's kind of interesting. I've learned a lot along the way, and even as a coach today, I continue to learn. I think that's really important. So I'm originally from Lincolnshire in England. I joined the army in 1996 in the infantry. I spent most of my time in the reconnaissance platoon, deployed 6 times: Kosovo, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. I was a platoon sergeant at the infantry training center. I then went to Sandhurst as a colour sergeant, where I met Ash. We worked together on a couple of projects which were very successful, I might add, and it involved a lot of it involved a lot of coaching, learning, and basically developing human behaviour, so to get really good performance outcomes. I moved to the United States, and I immediately started working at the United States Military Academy at West Point as a triathlon coach. I competed as a triathlete myself. I've been a coach. I mean, you're a coach kind of in the military anyway, but I was a coach really since probably the age of 20, a track coach, cycling coach, triathlon coach, other stuff as well. And obviously all the courses that you do, teaching certificates, etc. You kind of learn little things along the way, but also what you do within an organization to get the best out of people as a reflection on you. So that really was something I wanted to do when I moved to America. So so I started working actually as a volunteer initially because I was going to go to university. And within a few months, I kind of really tried to get in the weeds with the culture of things and how people operate and get the very best out of them. And within a few months, I was actually offered the job there as a head coach. So I was actually a volunteer to start with, and they liked the way I operate and what I got out of those officer cadets. And so they offered me the head coach job, which was fantastic. And within a year, I made them, maybe a year, 18 months, maybe, I made them national champions. So it was pretty good. Mm-hmm. So they were happy. I was happy. It was pretty good. And then I worked there for almost 4 years. I started to do a bit more work on the national scene. I had developed a few athletes to the elite level. And then I got headhunted by USA Triathlon. I did a camp at the Olympic Training Center, which was actually kind of like doing some kind of selection card. Actually, it was pretty hard. The lady who ran it is a lady called Lindquist, who's a Olympian from, I think she was 2004 from the Athens Games, and like a legend in the sport. And she ran that camp because I had a couple of athletes that I thought were getting talent spotted, and it turns out it was me that was getting talent spotted. So that's pretty cool. At the end of it, I kind of got put in a corner and grilled about a few things, and I was kind of figuring out, why am I the only coach here and there's all these athletes? It's kind of weird, something suspicious. But at the end, a gentleman called Bobby McGee gave me kind of an interview and kind of offered me a job, which was the national development coach position for the Elite Triathlon Academy at the US Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. At that stage, it was kind of, I wouldn't say failing, but it wasn't where it was supposed to be in terms of its goals and aims. With the way I operate and my principles, I think came across quite clear, and they needed, a kick up the butt to get it going. And so I came into there. Actually, the course was the camp was pretty tough. I thought it was really long days. I thought they did a really good job of organizing it. Actually, I was kind of impressed. And I was looking forward to a few days off at the end of it, but they wanted me to start the next day. So it was kind of a test of my fortitude and my drive to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, yeah, absolutely. So I took it on, relished the challenge, got in there within probably 6 months. I turned most of their careers around. I had a top 3 in worlds, a top 5 in worlds, and that US national champion. So I really turned that program around, which was really good fun because I got to work with the very best in the world in all sorts of arenas and areas and specialities to support what I was doing as a coach. So it's kind of a really big learning curve for me too at that stage to work with some of the best trainers and coaches. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that really stood out was, especially while I was there, that I learned, it took a lot from, was working with sports psychologists and the way you can actually get the very best from people and really mold the way they think, because it's not really changing the way you think, it's just molding the way you think and shaping it into something else which gets you those performance outcomes. And I believe the biggest thing we found was like just the how to deal with and distract from anxiety and things like that, things which inhibit performance. And so that was really good. It also, I learned a few lessons. I mean, within the military, you work within small teams all of the time. And so you learn what are the good things and not so good things and areas of growth, I like to call them, to kind of develop what really makes a team be something special and something that excels. It's not just we're here and it's not an attendance. We're not just going to McDonald's, clocking in, clocking out and doing our job. We're going in, doing the very best. And that kind of was the start of that journey, I think. I mean, within the military, I'd experienced it, but it wasn't really until I left the army that I started to realize and look back and go, even I could do better. Like I could have done this better and this better because I was having those experiences in a different arena and a different thought process, I guess. Yeah. So that's kind of what happened. And then I worked there for, I would say about 8 months, I think, turned that program around. And then I got offered another job. And this one was actually not working because at that stage I was working directly for USA Triathlon as a national development coach. Mm-hmm. And that was in 2014. I moved to the United States in 2012, beginning of 2012. So it took me that time to get to that level, which is pretty quick. Yeah. Excuse me. And then when I went to, so towards the end of that period, I then got offered another job, which was actually a private endeavor, which is the way a lot of coaching works and coaching groups work within sport. They're not always within a federation. Mm-hmm. Everybody just doesn't work directly for Team USA within a specific sport, team volleyball, handball, or whatever, basketball, or whatever the sport is. Yeah. Generally, it's like a club base. But within the United States, there is probably, at the time, there's probably maybe 5 or 6 groups of elite athletes that train towards Olympic qualification within the sport of triathlon. So it was kind of, for me, I wouldn't say daunting because I just went head in. You've got to be bold. Yeah. And I took that opportunity to go from the developmental level to then the Olympic focus level. And I took on athletes at that stage who are currently looking at going to Rio 2016. Mm-hmm. Looking back, I think I wasn't really ready as a coach, and not just as a coach, but really as a manager. I think there was some things, some mistakes I made, and some things I've learned in the long term that really helped me today to be the coach I am today, which I'll come on to in a second. Mm. So that process went through. None of those athletes went to Rio. There was people already, by the time I took over that program, they were already a year behind. I was already a year behind in terms of because it takes 2 years to accrue Olympic points. And we were a year out from the game. So it was already too late for those individuals with me to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of then developed Origin Performance, which I'd actually started while I was at West Point. Mm-hmm. I developed a cycling team, which was like another leg of what I was doing within New York City and kind of competing at that level and developing athletes from Cat 5 up to Cat 1, etc., which was really good, really successful. And so Origin then became like a new thing in terms of triathlon. Mm-hmm. And then I at that point really started to have serious success. And so I had a couple of athletes that were, I was developing them as juniors. And my thing is, the way I operate is maybe different to some coaches. Some coaches will, especially at the very, very top level, that top 2%, will recruit really good athletes. They will recruit athletes who've already made it, who are already like crushing it, already Olympic level athletes, perhaps I would say. So they're diamonds. I'm the sort of guy who likes to, they polish diamonds. I like to create them. That's kind of what I like to say. So I'm looking for people who have talent, and I'm trying to figure out ways, because that's what's important to me, to get them to that next level. How do I get them there? What do I need to change? Mm-hmm. And it's not just about physiology. Physiology is super important, looking for genetics, looking at biomechanics, having people assessed with a really good team of people around you, which I find is one of the most important things too, is having some, I guess, humility and, being open and vulnerable. Mm-hmm. is a word, something that you don't hear very often in from where I'm from. Mm-hmm. To allow other people around you to support you, and to look at you, and to look at your athletes, and with their specialized areas, develop them at the top level. So if you can find a team, and it's something that I've managed to do, is find a team of people around me, which enables to lift me up as a coach, and I learn all the time, and then lift my athletes up as well. And then we're all this family, this team. It kind of makes it very, very, one, enjoyable, but two, everybody has belief.
Yeah.
And then within a few years, I've had like US #1 male. I've had like probably 20 USA national champions. Now I coach like a horde of international athletes, and now I compete completely on the world stage at the Olympic level. So I have like Brazil #1, South Africa #3, Spain #3. I've got athletes from all over the world, and it's fantastic. So now I have like a really good integrated team of different people with different personalities, coming from different cultures, but all follow the same mindset and the same list of values and standards, actually. So funnily enough, and so now I've been, it's 2020 now, I've been US National Coach of the Year 3 years in a row. I was nominated as a US Olympic Coach of the Year, runner-up, not winner yet, last year, which is fantastic. And so, and that's in really, if you put it into perspective, probably full-time 5 years, 5.5 years probably. So that's actually pretty quick. And right now in the United States, there are a couple of other groups that do what I do, but not many. I'm now really in a realm of people on the international stage. We actually have a kind of I wouldn't say a drinking club, but we have a club of a few of us who get together at races, coaches now. So I like to network and get to know people and get other people's ideas and share my ideas too. I think it's really important. It's very competitive in sport, and everybody wants to beat everybody else, and everybody else has got secrets. But the truth is there is no secrets. There is good development of culture, how you develop mindset, how you deal with stress, how you structure that, how you lead in, how you replicate training on the everyday basis, and to make it as close as possible to what you're doing into racing, etc. And I can talk about that in a second too, of how I function and how I operate and how I get the best out of my people in a second. So that's where I am right now. So currently I live in Colorado. We usually move around the world. Obviously with what's going on with COVID-19 right now and some other things, that's actually stopped. We finished doing a 2-month training camp in South Africa, and which went fantastic, which was unreal, because culture, how everybody was performing, executing, confidence, belief was unreal. So we were just like ready to rip. And just to give you an idea of where we're at, we were in the last 4 months of Olympic qualification out of 2 years. Wow. And so that was to finish on May the 11th, which is obviously past now. And now the Olympic Games has been put back another year. They're still trying to figure out how they're going to, slot in and continue that qualification period to allow athletes to get where they need to be, because people are in different slots. But that's kind of where we're at. So usually what happens is we do a summer training camp, because we're in Colorado. It's pretty cold during the winter. In fact, it's very cold, but it's dry, but it's always sunny, so it's good. But it's cold. So, and triathlon's a summer sport, so we like to get out of the sun. And I'm ginger, so that's probably not the best for me. So I have to factor 1,000 all the time. In fact, even when I'm in my office, I have to wear sunscreen. So anyway, so yeah, we'll normally do a training camp in the winter. And then we may come back and do altitude. And then we really follow the World Triathlon Series race schedule, which can be pretty hectic. So it starts off usually in Abu Dhabi. So this year we were in South Africa, because that's the straight north flight up to Abu Dhabi. We were going to do a World Cup in Cape Town, which actually got cancelled, unfortunately. So we did a local race there, learned some lessons. And then, unfortunately, COVID-19 kicked in. So normally we do Abu Dhabi, and then Bermuda, Yokohama in Japan. What do we do then? Leeds, Hamburg, Edmonton, Montreal, and then Worlds could be anywhere. It's been, Gold Coast, Australia, Edmonton. Last year it was in Lausanne, Switzerland. The year before it was in Rotterdam. But then that's the World Triathlon Series. You have 3 layers, and it's something that I have to prepare for. And I have athletes at different levels. So within those 3 layers, I have athletes who are focusing on different things. So you have like Continental Cup level, which is really done by continent. So there is Continental Championships, etc. And each one of those gives a different level of points. And then you have World Cup, so which is next level, which is like very strong, top of the world, best athletes in the world level. And then you have World Triathlon Series, which is like the best. Like these are the guys who are competing to go to the Olympics, along with World Cup athletes too. So there's like 10, I think 8 to 10 World Triathlon Series races. Yeah. And there are like 20 something World Cups, and then there are hundreds of Continental Cup races. So there are so many options for development with different different environments, different terrains, which suit different athletes. You have to figure all that stuff out. So that's generally kind of how it works. And so right now, and at this period of time, I mean, right now we would have just been our final lead-in to going into the games, which would have been heat acclimatization. We'll use heat chambers, like monitoring with like internal pills that have got thermometers in them, which we basically got like a little Bluetooth in there, and we'll continuously figure out exactly how people are reacting to heat to make sure we don't overcook it, and we get the right stimulus we need, ready for what we're doing on race day, because Tokyo in the summer is horrendous. We did a test event there last year, which was like an Olympic trials race. I had one of my girls, Victoria Lopez. She's probably the fastest swimmer in the world in the sport of triathlon anyway. She'd actually do very well in open water swim as an Olympic sport, I think. She came 4th, which was phenomenal. And then I had Matt Mcilroy, who's US #1 right now. US #1, #2, he kind of switches back and forth with another guy, coach Eli Hemming. He was had a really bad swim, but still managed to run into 16th, which is a really good result, believe it or not, but it's not where we should have been. In terms of athletes and what we do, I talked a little bit about polishing diamonds and all that kind of stuff, and I like to make them. Over the last few years, I've had athletes go from the junior level, and I've taken them all the way to World Triathlon Series podium, which is ridiculous. Like, that's just fantastic. And there's not many coaches in the world who do that. And I've done that a few times now. There's not just one fluke with one person. We've done that a few times. And I think some of the reasons why this happens is I guess, if you was put it into words, it's really kind of like, how do you get that person from wherever their starting point is, and that could be anywhere, even the best in the world. Like, there is that little bit that takes them to the very, very top. You may be dropping in top 10s in a race, but how do you get on the podium? It's really difficult. And it's all about human performance. And human performance is not just about, doing testing and training programs and off you go. It's all encompassing. So I like to think about, I'm continuously learning as a coach and as a leader as well, because my job is also to lead, but I also develop leaders. Like, I believe everybody's a leader. That doesn't mean to say somebody's at the front pulling everybody else. It means everybody's taking action. Everybody moves with purpose. Everybody has a very specific, I wouldn't say emotionalist, but probably a stoic mindset, more really just getting the job done. They know what needs to be done and how it's got to be done, and then they do it. And my job really is to kind of enable that. So that's kind of my journey.
Right. I love it, and obviously I'm aware of it anyway. We've been friends for so long, and obviously I've seen this journey, albeit from afar, from this side of the world. But it's an amazing success, and I'm so proud of what you've achieved, like you said, in such a short time. It's fantastic, and I love to keep track of it. And it's really good to just hear it in full like that. So I appreciate you sharing.
That's not even the full version. There's so much more.
I know. One of the things that jumped out at me though. So going back to sort of your transition from UK to US when you started at West Point. So what were the things, if there was anything, that you thought from a cultural or just different ways of performing and that different perspective, hitting on that? Was there anything that stood out from that you had to adjust, or you needed to adjust the team?
Yeah, for sure. I think so many people in life, especially as they're young, I think when you work with young people, everybody loves, hanging out as a group and all that kind of good stuff. Very good socially. But when it comes to actually working as a team, it's kind of understanding what that actually means. And within something like triathlon, which is a very inherently selfish sport, everybody's focusing on themselves. There's so many people I've coached, amateurs and such like, who are CEOs of companies. I've worked a lot with a lot of people because I worked at West Point, so New York, so I was coaching a lot of people out of the city, which is interesting too. I'm still friends with today and still mentors today. And but yeah, inherently selfish. And I think, being successful doesn't, it depends on how you define success really, but being successful and to get to the very top, I believe, in the way we operate, it isn't about you as an individual. Like, if I can teach, like, some of my best athletes, who are the best and some of the best in the world, they are the best in the world, not because they focus on themselves, but because they externalize everything else. Yeah. So let me explain. So within a team, if we're going and doing a training session, for instance, and they turn up and they see the whiteboard and it's like horrendous. I know what's going to happen. I can tell you exactly what's going to happen from start to finish. They're going to turn up and they're going to go, oh my God. And then I'm going to give them a pep talk. We're talking about mindset. We're talking about where our minds need to be when we do this workout, this task, this, whatever we've got to do, this project we have to complete. And then where I want them to be, because the way I formulate training is the stimulus that I require for the outcome of the race, basically, but trying to get them used to it, because in the end, it will alleviate that pressure, anxiety. And so while I was at West Point, when I got there, even though they're Army officers and they're taught to be, leaders, I do think, and I found this at Sandhurst as well, there is a big gap between the team and the individual. Yeah. And I think if you take what you have, especially as an Army officer, or even a senior NCO or junior NCO, it doesn't really matter, or a manager, middle manager, upper manager, it doesn't really matter. If you take the people you've got and you make them the very best they can be, then you are going to be the very best that you can be, and you're always learning too. And I think that was the key. When I went there, everybody was kind of just doing their own thing, focusing on themselves. And maybe I would also say the recruitment process of people we took on was probably not as stringent as depending on what the aim and the mission was of the team. And, I think one of the things we did, I'm sorry, this is a roundabout way of explaining it, but what we did is sit everybody down and we goal set as a team, which we do as individuals. Okay, so now we need to figure out what our goals are. So there's no point trying to aim for something if we don't know what we're aiming for. So And everybody's like, yeah, we want to be national champions. We want to be regional champions, national champions, yada, yada, all this kind of good stuff. Okay, well, right. Okay, well, how do you think we have to get there? So what I did is I spent a lot of time talking with them, and the whole ethos and the direction of where we went was actually developed by them. So that was lacking. So everybody was kind of doing their own thing and really working hard. Like they were working so hard, really strong characters, a lot of strong characters, and some egos there too. We had to work on that one. And then, yeah, that's kind of the way it was. It wasn't, there was kind of like a hierarchy within that team, which I also find very toxic. It's great to have a hierarchy in terms of, people are always going to be better than other people at certain things, but then those people are going to be better at other things. And I think one of the things we found there was you had people who were like super athletic, amazing, great, but really when the pain kicked in, because they didn't have things like belief, that's when they start to fail. Whereas the people who would like not be probably the most athletic, but had a really good mindset, managed to keep going and would crush it and push through. So they were the consistent people, and those were the people actually in the end which would succeed. Not the ones who would come in hard, fast, aggressive, and prowess and ego, which I think is the paralyzer of performance, personally. And these guys who actually took it outside the box, looked at themselves, but just maintained that consistency. Excuse me.
There's so many good points in that last little paragraph you just say. There's what to highlight there. Show me one individual that has been successful on his own or her own. They don't exist. Everything is all about collaboration and teams. Okay, it might be the individual that you see. There's a team behind them. There is never one person that's successful.
Even as a coach, even as a leader, even as a manager, people may not realize this, but and I do. I use that same verbiage. So I will, when I sit down and I talk, especially when I take on a new athlete, this is a collaboration between me and you. This isn't me being the boss saying you need to do this, 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 and this to be successful. Don't get me wrong. I will do that and I will guide the right way. And my job is to keep my finger on the pulse and monitor performance, monitor stress, monitor anxiety, monitor recovery, all these things. But it's ultimately a collaboration, and the feedback I get back. Now, sometimes in some environments that's not, appropriate. I get that, but in my environment, it definitely is. Having that comeback is actually important because it can, as long as it's done in the right way, you can get really good information, which then can change the trajectory of where an individual is going.
100%, mate, 100%. And the other one, again, you mentioned it. It's the psychology rather than physiology. Let's use those terminologies. You and I both know, having done what we've done in our sort of previous careers, that I've never been the fittest. 100%. There's been far fitter people stood next to me, but because I've got the ability to manage myself in there, and for whatever reason, I've outperformed other people that were far physiologically better than I was, but because I had the right mindset and the self-awareness, I was just able to continue and outperform. And it is so key, even regardless of whatever your context is, music, sport, business, it is the mindset that wins at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I love it. So you sort of, we delved into it at the start. Could you explain a bit more about sort of what your perception is of human performance? I know you briefly mentioned it, and then then go into like how you deal with it with your athletes.
I think we've covered a lot of it, actually, to be honest. But, I think it's number one is you've got to look at yourself first. So it's very easy to slip in and go, okay, this person's this person is this, and make assumptions, judgments, whatever you want to call it, about people, how they operate, and what their potential could be. And I now have got a good mind and eye for looking at what people's potential can be, not just by their physiology, but just by having conversation. That's the key thing, because if you want people who are successful and people who are going to grow and people who are going to develop, then it has to come from them. And so human performance is not just, and you can develop this. Like, people will say, some people have got it, some people haven't. I don't believe that. I think you can develop it, absolutely. you've just got to find the right ways to develop it. You've got to find the right ways to flick switches for certain people. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there are always going to be people who, I've coached people who've been phenomenal, like genetics like you would not believe. Like, I'm like, holy moly, this guy's got a VO2 max of 86 and like he's got this and this, and you know, swims so well. And then you get them in a race environment and they just fall apart. Mm-hmm. I actually had one guy, he was a 2004 Olympian. I'm not going to say his name, great guy, but he was one of the best runners in the United States. And he came into the sport of triathlon, achieved so much in running, but then really kind of started ground zero with triathlon, which was kind of very difficult to do. You know, had a Nike contract, all this stuff, and great guy. I'm still friends with him today. But because, and this goes back to the thing about human performance, within his realm and within what he was doing, he had everything. It worked really well. But I believe human performance is about not just focusing on one thing. It's like all encompassing. If you can do something, this is the way I think. Like, I think if I personally, as a coach, like I was, you know, I was a color sergeant at 11 years in the army, I'd done really well, et cetera, and then I switched my job to this, my mind to this, and using very similar principles, but growing all the time, been successful. I think I could do something else and do the same. I think if you have the right mindset, I think you can do anything you want. Like, you can achieve literally anything you want, but you've got to first of all, and I think this is what comes down to is to get that high performance level. You've got to be bold. Mm-hmm. So you've got to do things that put you outside your comfort zone. You've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that might include making mistakes. You may fail. So you may repeat things which don't go well, and then eventually you might get it right, and then you grow from it. As long as you grow from it, don't repeat it. That's the main thing. And move from there. So growth is huge. So, and then keep doing it. Mm-hmm. Like, keep finding things which test you, which you try new things, read new things, study new things, figure out new things, try and understand more. Don't just go with the flow. Never go with the flow. Mm-hmm. Try and get the very best out of everything you can, but also doing it in the right way. You know, I pride myself on being a good person. And I think, you know, there are people out there, especially in the sporting world and in business, who are ruthless. I'm not ruthless. I'm ruthless in my intent and I'm ruthless in my goals, but not in my principles. And then that repetition creates belief. So you go bold, you keep doing it, you repeat it, and repetition creates belief. Belief creates confidence. I also believe that confidence just comes from knowing something inside out, like having good subject matter, expertise, or experience, so repetition of experience. And that's one of the key things that I find with what I do. It's been really, really successful because it creates this belief. And then if you can repeat those things which are bold, mm-hmm. which are very similar to what you do in the execution of what your outcome is, for me, that's racing and Olympic qualification, then when you go into that, not only are you just repeating what you've done in training, mm-hmm. and being bold, repeating that, creating belief, it becomes something that's just proprioception. It's something that you always do. It's like second nature, and that in itself reduces stress hormones and all sorts of other things. You are in control. When you're in control in a high stressed environment where like everything's on the line, like some people fall apart, like literally fall apart. Some of the greatest athletes in the world, like the guy I was just talking about, the reason why he didn't make it is because he fell apart whilst on the world stage. So you're on the world stage, you couldn't cope in that environment. And that is the key. Mm-hmm. So once you get to that point, and then you're in control, then you can do magic things. I've had guys who've like literally just probably come like top 15 or so, like Mcilroy, for instance. I completely changed the way he was coached and trained from his previous coach. I inherited him about 2 years ago, and now he's like US #1. He's mm-hmm. broke records over and over again now in the last 18 months for US guys. The last time someone was as good as him was like 10 years ago. And this guy's not even touched the surface yet. And that is because of those things. He went bold, he kept repeating it. Repetition creates belief. He goes into an event, he's under control. And then we do other things to reduce stress, the lead in to the race, like travel, etc. I figure out when you help them, like you must sleep at this time, you must eat at this time. This changing light and eating patterns changes, your circadian rhythm, and then that enables you to kind of like slot back into a different time zone. And then being in that control enabled him to get on podiums, because he's like, I can't believe I'm here. This is like amazing. Like even he's like gets to the end of the race and he's like going, it worked. I'm like, it works.
So one down, it worked.
So I believe it's having the mindset. So that was that section there, was having that mindset, figuring out how to get that. And that's how I figured it out, is like how that works. Like I talked about earlier, is within every single training session, I have an aim, incentive, and a reason why of what we do. So it's not just done for no reason whatsoever. Okay. And I talk about that. And then I also have a conversation about that. There isn't just me standing up going, okay, right, this is what we're going to do. The aim of this is this. Like, I'm going to say, okay, right, this is a session. They've seen the whiteboard. This is what we're going to do. This is kind of how we operate. Mm-hmm. What do you think? And so I ask two questions usually. What do you think? And they're like, oh yeah, this sounds good. And then okay, how do you feel? Because thinking and feeling are two separate things, like emotion and cognitive intelligence, two separate things. Like how are you processing what we're doing? One side will be like really nervous about it, and the other side will be like, yeah, I just want to do this. This is a challenge. This is awesome. And so that's interesting. And so if then I'll just pertain it to what scenario it could be in racing. Okay, like let's say it's a really hard swim. It's like it's going to be horrendous. We're doing side by sides or whatever else. Okay, you're in the race. This is what's happening. How are you going to deal with that? Like, oh yeah, like things start clicking in, and then that belief also doubles. And so going back to what we talked about, going into the race, and they have all these new tools. So, and that also comes into kind of tactics too. So so many different sides to this. What we do is crazy. And then like, how do you develop tactics? Most people ask. I'm like, well, it's funny you should say that, because what we also do in training is we try and figure out scenarios. Like my guys ride with radios, which not many people do. Pro cyclists do, of course, and we do. And we'll definitely do them like on really basic skill work. So especially if we make a circuit, which is like a crit circuit, I'll be there controlling it. People will be on different channels. People will be working against other people. So you're constantly doing things. One, it makes it fun, which is a key requisite to performance, I think. So human performance, for it to go well and for it to, more importantly, be consistent. Like people can pull it out the bag, but if you want a consistent level of high performance to go on for as long as possible, then you need to keep people happy. And being happy might not mean, patting somebody on the back. It means giving people reward from their work. They see the clear pathway that they've taken and where they've got to. And that's part of my job, is going, look where you was 2 years ago. And they're like, oh, wow, like, God, I can't believe we've done all this. That's why I use social media as such a powerful tool. Mm-hmm. Most people think that, social media, for me personally, it's not about showcasing what we do, although it does help with recruitment, although I don't need it, because people see what we do and how we operate. But it's so my guys see it. They see it. They see my quotes in Instagram stories, and because they hear it day in and day out. It's really funny, because when they do TV interviews after races, after winning a race or whatever, they'll repeat that stuff. It comes off the tongue, like boom, 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 every single one. And I'm just like, this is amazing, because we're changing the way people think by, I guess, if it was to encompass human performance, it's not just about figuring out the minutiae of what makes the human body tick. Mm-hmm. It's the whole big picture of the culture of changing and developing. And this is what I was saying before. It is possible to change the way people think. Mm-hmm. Like I said, repetition creates belief. So if you say the same things, positive self-talk, positive affirmations, all these good things, and you do it as well as a coach, you don't just leave it to the psychologist. I have a really good relationship, and we have several psychologists working with several different athletes, because they have several different type of personalities. Mm-hmm. I have good relationships with those guys and girls, because it's important, because we're all on the same page.
Absolutely. I like it.
So Yeah, I could talk forever about this because there's so many different
Listen,
aspects.
I can discuss
It's
it.
really hard
Yeah.
to encompass it. I
You-
just think culture, attention to detail, developing a mindset, believing in that mindset, collaboration, making it fun, is really important. I think the number one thing really that if I could tell somebody who especially was not performing what to change, I would say live in the moment. Just like obviously make goals. We goal set, short term, medium term, long term, and then we break those down in what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is, like for me right now, I'm living in the moment, trying to be the best Ian O'Brien I can be for you, so that I can express this the best I can. Whether I'm doing a good job or not is debatable.
You definitely are.
But I think that's key because it takes away anxiety, because the more you think about what's happening in the future, the more you've got to think about those goals you've got to achieve, those deadlines you've got to meet, those numbers you have to reach, the more you'll paralyze and freeze yourself. I remember, like on the Sandhurst Carter, for instance, I remember I came top of that Carter, which I was rewarded, fun enough, with getting a female platoon, which at the time seemed like, oh my God, that's like, I don't know what, I was going through pamphlets. I wasn't sure how to deal with that. But actually it was one of the best things I did in the army. It was actually really taught me a lot about myself, but also about people. People is the key. And so I think I went off on a tangent there, but yeah, like there's so many different elements to this. And the collaboration, the living in the moment is the key thing. And that was the thing I think about when I inherited that platoon. I lived in the moment because I was like, okay, this is new. I've got to figure out, I've got to make changes. This is going to be different. And actually it wasn't different. It was actually exactly the same. In fact, I spent 5 terms in the colleges. So I was kind of lucky. And I spent 1 in the wing where I did the Sandhurst Cup with you, going to West Point, which is fantastic. And
which we came first and second. Let's let everyone.
First and second,
yeah. Came first and second.
Yeah, but that was collaboration. That was another good between me and you, and also Ian as well. Ian Milton was a great, I forgot the platoon commander's name now. Tom. Yeah, Tom. Fantastic guy. So that was really good. So that was a good experience. But again, it's. I think in some professions they call it, cuffing, or no cuff too tough, and all that kind of thing. But it's actually living in the moment. It's actually using your intuition, your intelligence at that moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sensing the context at the time.
Right, and then just maneuvering and adjusting. Absolutely. And I think the second thing was, so living in the moment and problem solving. I think are the 2 things. Like if you have the ability to kind of take a step back, look from the outside, look at the problem, and figure out how you can, make positive change. Yeah. I think those 2 things are probably the key elements of human performance, and everything else, Yeah.
So obviously you have worked across the globe, continue to work across the globe. And you've got international athletes from all different backgrounds, different cultures and stuff. And like you said, you've got your small drinking club now of international coaches that you mingle with. Is there sort of 1 or 2 or something that you just look back and reflect on and go, do you know what, this is the consistency amongst all these international, high performing athletes and coaches? Is there something that, that you look at and go, that's the key? Or is it just too complex? Again, I don't want to simplify it because I know how complex these things are.
I think it's complex, but I honestly believe, for me and for the people who I see and how they operate, the coach and the leader, like there is this term called familiarity. And so like, even though I'm close, like I don't tell my athletes this, but I love them. I love those guys. They're awesome. I think the world of them. I want the very best of them. I think that's another key thing. You have to really care about people because you will get the best out of them. But you there is still this line, this barrier. You still, if you allow yourself to become too close or too personal, then I wouldn't say that their belief in you changes, but it does a little bit. And I think that's something with all the coaches around the world that are the best performing coaches. And, you know, I wouldn't like to rank where I am right now, but we're doing well. But there are coaches who've been around a lot longer than I have, the very best coaches in the world. And they're great guys. They're very approachable with their athletes, but they have a persona, I think. And so I think you've got to have the ability to have a presence. Yeah. And the presence doesn't have to be aggressive, and it doesn't have to be, you know, you just have to be confident, I think. And even if you know, I think the key here is, like, I've made mistakes. I've made so many mistakes. And I think because whilst making those mistakes, I've realized it and then gone, okay, and I'm honest about it. Like, okay, that was a mistake. Even in performance, I may have overcooked an athlete going in, like even last year at the Olympic test event, which is technically Olympic trials. I think half of my group, and it's kind of an experiment for me, but I wouldn't tell my athletes that, but I had half of my group do a heat acclimatization camp in Japan for a couple of weeks before, and then I had the other half coming in surgical strike straight from Boulder, Colorado. So they did a heat training protocol within Boulder, Colorado, and then the ones in Tokyo actually trained with me. I was there, so I was like there on a scooter, giving them water while we're doing rides, all that kind of stuff, you know. So just, you know, really kind of controlling it. And the thing I found was, and I go to a lot of symposiums and stuff. Like, I went to the last one I went to was Brazil invited me to their national Olympic symposium because I coached different athletes from different countries and listen in to their instructors and their teachers and all this kind of stuff. And some of the things I learned even on that, I'm taking away little bits of information, excuse me. So allergies.
You've been quarantined.
Yeah, I've practically been, everyone's been in quarantine, right? So I think learning all those small things has been really, really important. And I've done a few. Like, there's been several federations now around the world which want me to go and help create their development pathway, how, you know, with their coaches, etc., which I think is a good opportunity, which I will do after the Olympics for sure, but not before. So I forgot the question.
It was just and you have answered it. It's just it was that, is there one thing that's consistent? And I think you said about the coach there, and I like it now. And recently I've done loads of studying into predominantly NFL coaches, but, you know, American football coaches and basketball coaches, and you look at the, you know, the really successful people, you know, the ones that have won countless championships, you know, and there is that, from what I can see, obviously I'm not there, so got to take it with a pinch of salt. There's always that friendliness and the humanistic side, but there's always that professional barrier as well. Not barrier, but there's that professional self-respect.
Yeah, we've got a job to do.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And both of you, the coach and athlete, both got jobs to do your job.
This is it, you know. And there's so many times where I've had an athlete call me, whether that's before a race, or even I'm talking to them at a race, before a race, or even in training, where they fall apart, you know, and something is not right, or they need help with something. And it's not because of a lack of belief. It's a lack of belief, or in the process, because that's what we follow, is we need to believe in the process. But it's more a belief in themselves. Even some of the best, you would not believe. Like, you know, there's so many books out there you could read about athletes who've, like, multiple gold medal winning athletes standing there on the start line, absolutely bricking it, because they have to perform, because the pressure is so intense. And how do you deal with that? And so that's why it's important to be that person who is, the way I explain it, and I even explain it to my athletes, like, I am the rock, I'm immovable. And there's one thing that I do which is very different to the way they operate, and that is when they win medals, I'm like, good, well done, okay, now we need to do better. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, it's not like, I'm not like, woo, yeah, you know, I'm not like partying and thinking this is it, like I've made it. Like, my job is to look forward. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? How do we improve on that? Like, that's the difference. So I'm this immovable object that is, I'm not, I'm not like some narcissist, lack of feeling type guy. Like, I'm very invested, and they know that. Like, and they know, we joke about this stuff all the time. Like, I'm like, I love you guys, but I don't like you guys. It's kind of funny. And they're like, oh, okay, but they know what I really think. And, but there is this line, and that is to be the immovable rock. Like, as a leader, I have to look at somebody in the eyes, and that guy's going to give me direction, whether I contribute to that or not, in terms of what the outcome of the plan is going to be. Like, whether that's a battle scenario, whether that's a business scenario, whether that's a sporting scenario. I'm looking to that guy for leadership, to be steady when the storm is raging, and that's my job. Because, and I see it so many times too with other coaches who are great guys, but still haven't figured that out, like running around going, and they're like, oh, my athlete's wheels are falling off. And I'm like, just chill, relax, go see a mechanic, figure it out. Your job is to just be stoic all the time and just figure things out. So
yeah, I like it. I appreciate that. That's a really nice way of putting it. Really good.
It's the same with, like, when, not just when things go well, like, okay, right, good job, high five, hug, like, good, like, get away from me, like, okay, right, let's move on. It's also when things go, when things go wrong, as well as when things go right. When things go wrong, okay, let's figure this out. Like, okay, let's break this down, reverse engineer what's happened. Okay, now we figure out new goals, move forward, and then figure it out. Yeah, and then being that, it's almost like being a parent, I guess, in a lot of ways. It's kind of how it feels. I think sometimes I feel like I'm a parent to, like, 15 world-class elite athletes who are at the top of their game, trying to keep it all together. It's a lot of work, but it's fun.
Yeah. Well, they're only humans at the end of the day, aren't they? Regardless of context.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's it. Mate, I love it. Like I say, I have and we have done, but we could talk for hours. But we're going to have to close it down. Mate, I really appreciate sort of your insights and sharing that with us, mate. It's been really valuable. I've learned a hell of a lot more, and a few questions that I'm going to go away with and sort of look into. For anyone that wants to find out any more about you or Origin or the team, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on many different platforms of social media. So, but also on LinkedIn as well. So, O'Brien Coaching, that's Origin Performance ITU Triathlon Training Group. Instagram, Origin Performance Training Group. So yeah, pretty much, O'Brien Coaching, Origin Performance ITU Triathlon Training Group. You'll find me anywhere. So anybody's got any questions, I'm always here to help. So absolutely. One of the big things about this is, and this is my final thought actually, is giving. So this might sound crazy, but is actually giving to others. I think that also, one, reduces a lot of anxiety, but also makes what we do in this journey so worthwhile. Like, if I can help somebody else do what they do, I get so many questions all the time from other coaches and people doing many different things, other athletes. And we have athletes join my group who are not even from, they're actually our competitors, but yeah, giving is the key as well.
Mate, I love it. I love that. And I'll put all your social media stuff and the website in the show notes anyway, so everyone can catch up with you there. Mate, thank you once again for your time. I really appreciate it. Insightful and hilarious as always, mate. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, mate. Have a good day and take care. I'll speak to you soon, Ash.
Cheers, mate.